On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Norfolk, 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 you won't be a stranger long. On a strip of sandy soil lies a county called Norfolk. It's Ontario's south coast, you know, and it's surely not remote. If you pass through or spend a day or decide to call it home, you'll see why we love it here and are proud to call it our own. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. Take in the small town atmosphere, be amazed at all that we grow. Like our kids that go and see the world and can't wait to return home. Drop a line in a placid lake or stroll along the shore. Take a tour on a peaceful country road and bound to be back for more. Of Norfolk, Norfolk, my southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger long. With hard work, we built a dream that only willing hands could do. It's on display at our fall fairs and at all the festivals too. Erie beaches, Carolinian forests, where the flower and dogwoods bloom. Patchwork fields and rolling hills, it's just the place for you. Norfolk, Norfolk, a southern county home. Norfolk, Norfolk, we know you can't go wrong with the friendly folk of Norfolk. You won't be a stranger along. Norfolk, 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 Norfolk.
I would like to start in a minute or two, folks, just to let you know. Okay, folks, we're back. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening. I would like to get on with our public hearings that are slated for 5 o'clock. So we have dealt with item A, and I would ask you please to turn to page 97 as I open this public meeting. I now officially open the public meetings held under the Planning Act and the Municipal Act, and I advise those in attendance that the Ontario Municipal Board, or the local planning tribunal, has the power under the Planning Act to dismiss an appeal to either a zoning bylaw and or an official plan amendment if the appellant does not make oral submissions to the public meeting or does not make written submissions to Norfolk County Council before the zoning bylaw is passed and or before the official plan amendment is adopted. I am going to page 97. This is staff report, TCS 1801. An application has been received to add special provision 14.934 to the subject lands to permit the construction of an accessory building requiring relief of 0.5 meters from the maximum permitted height of 6 meters to permit a height of 6.5 meters and 327.35 square meters from the maximum permitted usable area of the floor of 100 square meters to permit a usable floor area of 427.35 square meters. This includes the two accessory buildings. Bradley DePaw has put forth the application that affects the lands described as 1773 Concession 10 of Waterford. And again, the application is on page 97. Hi, Alicia. How are you today? Alicia Cull is ready to present her report. Thank you.
So as the mayor stated, this is an application to construct an accessory building, and it requires relief from the maximum permitted usable floor area and the maximum permitted height, and it will account for two buildings, so an existing building on the property and a proposed new one. So the property is 2.37 acres in size and fronts onto the north side of Concession 10 Townsend. It is zoned and designated agricultural and hazard lands, and the proposed accessory building would be within the agricultural designation and zone. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposed development is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the official plan. It's appropriate development in the agricultural zone and represents good planning. Staff support this application and recommend that it be approved.
Thank you very much. Well done. I'll open it For any questions of council to staff on the report, please. Nothing at this moment. I'll certainly give you an opportunity at the conclusion. Is Brad here this evening? Hi, Brad. I would like to invite anyone who would like to speak in favor of this application to come forward at this time to the podium. And as always, Brad, we extend that invitation should you wish to speak to you first. Are you looking after the little one? Oh, great job, guys. Do you wish to speak, Brad? You don't have to. I'm just asking if you wish. Not yet. Wait till council gets a hold of it. I'm kidding. Thank you, Brad. Is there anyone else here in attendance this evening that wishes to speak in support of this application? Is there anyone in attendance this evening that wishes to speak in opposition or in general to the PAW application? Council, anything further? I need a mover and seconder to close the public meeting. That would be Geisens and Height. Those in favor? This public meeting is closed. There is a recommendation on page 97. I am looking for direction from this council. Councillor Columbus, please.
So move the recommendation.
And you need a seconder, Sonnenberg. Thank you, sir. I have Columbus moving, Sonnenberg seconding that the application of Mr. Paw at 1773 Concession 10 in Townsend, that affects part lot 23 Concession 9 in Norfolk County. This is to amend our zoning bylaw 1Z 2014. The file numbers in front of you. We're recommending approval for reasons as set out in the report. There's been no public input on this application, therefore none will be considered as part of the decision. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you. Page 109, please. This is staff report DCS 18-02. The application before us is to recognize an accessory building requiring relief of 283 square meters from the maximum permitted usable floor area of 200 square meters. To permit a usable floor area of 483 square meters. This application is required in relation to a surplus farm dwelling severance application, which proposes to sever a lot having an area of .87 hectares. VJC Inc. has put forth this application. It affects the lands described as 1015 on the first concession road of Port Rowan. The applicant is Mr. Glenn Kuhn. I'm not sure if Mr. Kuhn is here. Is the agent here for Mr. Kuhn? No, no agent, no applicant. That's fine. Just have to ask. Alicia, I think it's your turn again. Thank you. If you give us your report.
This is an application to recognize a barn having an area of 483 square meters where 200 square meters is permitted, and it's required in relation to a proposed surplus farm dwelling severance. The lands are 2.16 acres in size and are currently part of a 147-acre farm. The lands front onto the north side of First Concession Road and are proposed to be severed. The lands are zoned and designated agricultural. The provincial policy statement permits surplus farm dwelling severances at a size that is the minimum needed to accommodate water and septic. The official plan requires lots to be an appropriate size for residential use. It is staff's opinion that this application does not conform to the official plan and is not consistent with the provincial policy statement. The proposed severed lands are oversized as they are not the minimum size needed to accommodate water and septic system. The barn that exists on the property is not residential in nature. It was built as an agricultural barn, and it was built for farm use, and it should be removed if it's no longer needed for farm purposes. It is not an appropriate use on a residential lot, and it would be much easier to reduce the size of the lands proposed to be severed if the barn were removed. Staff do not support this application and recommend that it be refused.
Thank you, Alicia. Questions? Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to planning, this is very similar to the application that we just did. The previous app has 2.7 acres of land, and yet you're recommending refusal here, based on the size of the lot?
Through the mayor, it is based on the size of the lot, and this is one large barn. On the previous application, there was an existing building, and there was a second one proposed to be built as an accessory to residential, so it wouldn't have been built as a barn.
So technically, someone could tear this barn down only to build another one for a shop, just like the last app that we just did, no?
Through the mayor, it probably wouldn't be supported if it was one large building like that. Again, the last one was two separate buildings, which does reduce the types of uses that could occur. But technically, if they did sever a lot that was, for example, 1 acre and wanted to build something accessory to residential that's smaller in size, it could be supportable.
Okay. I heard you mention access to water as well, the determine the lot size. As I understand it, this particular property receives the water from the pond.
Mm-hmm.
So without this severance moving forward, that house will have no access to water. Will the municipality be looking at bringing water up to this house?
Through the mayor, we've had these situations before, and it's recommended that either a new well is drilled or the lot is reconfigured. So even if the barn was kept, there are still opportunities to reduce the size, but the barn makes it more difficult.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I spoke with the owner, and he's away and couldn't make it here tonight. He's on a mission in Africa. But the farm is no longer a farm. He has restored it with the help of the Long Point Region Conservation Authority, and he has no use for that barn.
Through the mayor, it could be torn down then.
Right, at a cost to him only to have the next person who buys that property who wants a spot for their toys, like our previous application, the applicant to build another shop.
Through the mayor, at a smaller size, most likely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize to staff for having my back to them, but I want to refer to my report. My question, Mr. Mayor, is similar in line to Councillor Heights, where the previous application requested and received permission to have a combined accessory building floor space of 427 square meters, and this one we are being told to turn it down when it is 483 square meters, so only roughly 10% greater than the other one. Correct? I guess, just so my numbers are correct so far.
Through the mayor, that's correct.
Okay, so my question then, I guess, to staff, Mr. Mayor, on what part of this application are staff mostly recommending refusal? The fact of the barn being there and would be part of the parcel that would be severed, or the fact that the lot being requested is bigger than they need to accommodate the barn? I saw that staff recommended a reduced size. Which of those two is what's motivating staff to recommend against it in particular?
Through the mayor, it's both reasons.
So you can't say one is more important than the other, Alicia, at this point?
Not in this case.
Okay. I do sort of see, Mr. Mayor, where staff are coming from, that on the back end of the barn, according to map number 4, it still shows roughly 50 meters by 70 meters of other land that is part of what they're asking to have severed and isn't necessary for septic or even to house the barn, I guess. But I do share my colleague's point that there's a lot of similarities between these two applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Mayor Luke, through you to planning staff, and what was the maximum allowable square footage for an accessory building just a couple of months ago.
Through the mayor, there's not a maximum size for barns if it's on a farm. For accessory residential, it's 100 square meters, but for surplus farm dwellings, severances, we allow 200 square meters.
Okay, have we changed that now up to the 200, from the 100 to the 200?
Through the mayor, for surpluses, it is 200, and I believe the application coming later tonight, the general cleanup bylaw is proposing to change it to 200
So
for the
from 100
agricultural
to
zone.
200. And why were we suggesting 100 and now suggesting 200? What's the rationale? Because I get quite confused myself when, my fellow colleagues say, well, what's the matter with that size? It's go bigger, go as big as you want, do whatever the heck you want. So, it has to be some kind of parameters. I was a referee once. You got to make a judgment and draw the line somewhere. What's the rationale?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Black, it's a good question, and as the council may remember, the 100 number came basically from a rollover of the previous zoning bylaws. We know through various applications, in particular that Alicia's dealt with quite a few of them, that 200 is a good number, and that would provide some more flexibility to our agricultural community to have their toys and things like that in their accessory buildings. So that's why the 200 is being recommended. And we did previously allow that flexibility with barns on surplus dwellings, and we kind of understood that originally as well.
But why not 300? Why not 400?
Again, Shannon will speak to this further in her report tonight, but 200 is about the average where we're seeing those applications come in. So therefore, people that want accessory buildings to store their toys are asking for about 200.
Okay, but that's the only criteria? So it's like, well, why can't they have 400 square meters? Just because everybody else has got one at 200? Like, why can't they have 400?
Through Mr. Mayor, again to Councillor Black, they could, but they need to come through this council to make that decision.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brunton, please.
Well, man, maybe my question's been answered, but I find it odd that we'd penalize him because he's got a barn. It'd be different if he wanted to build this size of a barn. But, question is, I'm on page 119 of the application, I guess, and I'm looking at, is it 50 meters from the back of the barn? And did you say earlier that he could cut down on the size of the lot? Could he cut down on the size of the lot, still have a proper setback for a residential property, or no?
Through the mayor, yes, he could.
If he did that, would it be more appropriate, would consideration to keep the barn be okay if he cut down on the lot size?
Through the mayor, I would not support it. This barn was used for livestock in the past as well. It's clearly agricultural. So generally with surplus farm dwelling severances, barns are meant to remain with the farm. It's just houses that are severed off.
Well, kind of an odd thing to penalize the person just because the barn is there. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Columbus, please.
Yes, to the planners, Mr. Mayor. To what use does the applicant propose to put the barn to?
Through the mayor, it's my understanding he proposes to sell the property. So I think it's a selling feature. He doesn't have a use for it right now.
Thank you.
So Alicia, if I may, having read through this, there's 50 meters from the rear of the existing barn to the rear yard, which is over 160 feet. It would not be difficult if the applicant agreed to it, and he's not, obviously, of chopping off some of that back behind the barn. And secondly, the barn itself is twice over what you would recommend in floor area, correct?
That's correct.
So those are the two stumbling blocks. Don't make it comply with our provincial plan. Councillor Height, please. Thank you, Alicia.
Mayor Luke, if I could ask planning staff to pull up the picture of the satellite view, the overhead. Can you zoom into that at all? No, well, if you look at the dark spot in the top left corner,
Yes.
that's a pond. So that limits the ability. It's more of a natural
Thank you.
rectangle than being able to just cut across and say half of the pond is the farm and half is the house, and that's where I'm getting the water from.
Councillor Height, I assume the applicant wants to keep the pond with the property, not eliminate it. Correct. Thank you, sir, for that. I didn't realize that. Any further questions of planning before we continue here? Yes, Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Mayor, being that the applicant isn't here, would it be appropriate to defer this?
That would be the wish of council. That could be done.
Can I get a comment from the planning department, see what they think about deferral?
Alicia, certainly.
Through the mayor, he did know about the date and was going to send someone. If they couldn't make it, they were going to call me, but I didn't receive anything. So he was aware that it was going and that staff was not supporting it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further at this time? I'll proceed. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak in favor of the application? If so, come forward now. Yes. Give us your names, please.
My name is Jeff Newman. This is my son, Johnny Newman. We're from Port Rowan. Thank you
Yes.
for letting us.
Welcome.
Thank you for letting us speak here. We just live down the road from Mr. Kuhn's property here. I know the property quite well. My son, Johnny, he'd like to buy this property if this severance would go through. The barn, there's lots of uses for a barn if you're not a farmer. Like, there's all kinds of uses that we could use that barn for: storage,
workshop, animals, all kinds of stuff you can use a barn for.
it's a perfectly good building. But more important than that, the water that comes to the house, it comes from that pond. Like, just, to me, it seems senseless to cut off a water supply to a residence.
And also tear down a perfectly good barn that has a lot of use left in it. Why tear it down? Still use it.
That's about all our comments that we have.
Okay, and we appreciate those, and we'll ask if there's any questions for these gentlemen. Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Through you to the deputation, where do you live? Like, where is your place right now, Mr. Newman, compared to this property?
It's about a half a mile east of that property,
2 houses
on the
down.
same side of the road.
And is it a farm property as well?
That's correct.
That's right.
Okay, so, and you have barns?
Yeah, I'm not a farmer. We have lots of barns on our property that are well used.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Black.
Through you to our speakers, just some advice before you buy this or make an offer to purchase on it. You might want to go to planning staff and ask them, what can you actually use that barn for? Because I think you might wake up to the fact that you can't do what you want to do. Just some advice.
Thank you.
Any other questions for these gentlemen? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone in attendance this evening who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to the Kuhn's application? Anything further from this council? Mover and seconder is needed to close this public meeting. Wells and Geisens have moved, seconded. Those in favor? I now close this public meeting. There is a staff recommendation on page 109. I'm looking for, I do have a mover for that recommendation, but I don't have a seconder. What's your wishes here? Councillor Height?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve this application. You know,
A
I have
motion for approval?
Yes?
Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Brunton has seconded. Moved by Height, seconded by Brunton, that the application of VJC Inc. in care of Glenn Kuhn at 3950 Lakeshore Road in Port Rowan, affecting the lands and parts of lots 13 and 14 on Concession 1 in South Walsingham Geographic Township, to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw 1Z 2014 be approved. Do we have some public input? Just leave that. Okay, be approved. Discussion. Councillor Black.
I agree with planning staff and that they recommended refusal, so I won't be supporting the motion. And I agree with planning staff. The lot size is too big. It's a barn and it can be used for animals. And we already heard the deputation say that, there's lots of uses and you could be using it for that purpose. Well, you can't use it for that purpose once it's severed. And secondly, we don't have the applicant here nor an agent. So, it says to me they're not overly concerned about the refusal recommendation, or else they would be here.
Thank you. Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I spoke with the applicant several times since this is, he's been dealing with planning. And he had already made plans to go away to Africa on a mission, like I said earlier. His agent, unfortunately, one of my constituents as well, wasn't able to attend today because his mother came down sick just the other night or something, and I believe he had to take her to the hospital, so he wasn't able to attend either. These things do happen, Mr. Mayor, but for me, this is a common sense application. We have a 2-acre property. The water comes from the well. There isn't a lot of water options that we have at this particular property. It's very hilly. It was basically animal pasture, and it's going to make an excellent 2-acre property for some lucky buyer. There's no point ripping down a perfectly good barn. The farm property that's retained has already been restored as a natural environment, so there's absolutely no use for that barn to go with this restoration, which will be a woodlot at some point in time. And I don't know, it just makes sense to me that you actually have a barn that goes with a piece of property. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I will be supporting the motion. And I was struck by the similarity between the two applications. The first application, which planning staff recommended approval of, was on a 2.4 acre parcel, and the applicant was requesting 327 meters of relief for an accessory building in a rural area. This application that we're now dealing with is on a 2.2 acre parcel, so almost the same size, and they're requesting 283 meters of relief. So they're requesting less relief for an accessory building on an almost identically sized property. So I struggle to understand, quite honestly, why staff recommended against this one, having recommended approval of the previous one. So I will support the recommendation, or the motion.
Any other discussion on the motion for approval? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of approval? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. On to page 121 of your agenda, gentlemen. This is staff report DCS 1803. This application that we received is to request removal of special provision 14.635 and a holding provision from the subject lands. This is required in relation to a boundary adjustment. In order to maintain a consistent zone for the entire new parcel, Peter and Susan Tomovic, good. I was going to say Tomosic. The C is silent. Tomovic, thank you, Mr. Black. Peter and Susan Tomovic have put forth the application affecting the lands described as 308 Queensway West in Simcoe. Still here, Alicia? Please.
This is an application to remove a special provision and a holding provision from the subject lands to ensure consistent zoning on the whole new property. This is required as the result of a boundary adjustment. The lands are 2,805 square feet in size and are part of a .22 acre commercial or residential parcel. The lands are located on the north side of Queensway West in Simcoe, and they're designated commercial and zoned service commercial with a holding and with special provision 14.635. This provision allows for office uses in conjunction with an adjacent property. The holding requires that site plan approval be obtained before further development of the lands, which has become redundant with our new site plan bylaw. This application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the official plan. It's a technical matter, and it represents good planning. It is appropriate in the service commercial zone. Staff support this application and recommend that it be approved.
Thank you. Any questions to our planning staff? Go ahead, Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to planning. How did we end up with this sliver that wasn't attached, or have they recently purchased it, or?
Thank you, Councillor Brunton.
My understanding, he owns both, does he not? I believe he does. But anyways, my question to staff is, the retained parcel, a garage, is that the way it shows right up against the boundary, the property line?
Through the mayor, it's going to be removed as a condition of the boundary adjustment.
Okay, so we won't have a minor variance problem. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Alicia? None at this time. I would like to invite anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this application to come forward. And I certainly would ask if the Talmavics or their agent is here, they could come forward and speak first. Okay, there may be a question for you at the end. Keep your pencil sharp and we'll proceed. Thank you, sir, for letting us know you're here. Is there anyone else in attendance who wishes to speak in favor of this application? Is there anyone in attendance this evening that wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this application? Any other questions from council members? I will need a motion to close this public meeting. Wells has moved, Columbus has seconded. Those in favor? That is carried. Recommendation from staff on page 121. I'm looking for direction. Councillor Oliver, please.
Move the recommendation.
Recommendation is for approval. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brunton. Oliver has moved. Councillor Brunton has seconded that, the application. Peter and Susan Tomovic, 7 Eden Place in Simcoe. This affects the lands described as part of Lot 76, Block 31, Plan 182 in the urban area of Simcoe. This is to amend our zoning bylaw 1Z 2014. The file number is in front of you for reasons that are set out in Report 1803, and that no public input has been received for this application and therefore will not be considered as part of this council's discussion on the motion. I hear none. Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. I'm going to forward to page 131. This is Staff Report 1805. It is an Environmental Impact Study Policies Official Plan Amendment. I got a feeling Alicia's not going away, gentlemen, so I will get her to continue then.
This is a county-initiated official plan amendment to amend the natural heritage feature policies and environmental impact study policies in our official plan. The purpose is to clarify existing policies and to provide staff the opportunity to waive the requirement for the preparation of an environmental impact study in certain circumstances. Currently, staff are very limited as to when an EIS can be waived based on the way the policies are worded. This results in many very minor environmental impact studies going to the Environmental Advisory Committee for review, and it slows down the development process. Staff hosted an open house on November 22nd, 2017. It was taken to our developer information session on December 12th, and there was a public meeting notice in the newspaper on January 3rd and 4th, and staff did not receive any feedback aside from general positive comments from the development community at the development information session. We received comments from Long Point Region Conservation Authority, Grand River Conservation Authority, the Forestry Department, and the Environmental Advisory Committee, and those comments were incorporated into the final proposed bylaw. This amendment is a result of planning staff working with the development community to streamline our processes. Staff recommend approval of the proposed amendment.
Thank you. Questions on the report? None at this time. If there's anyone in attendance, whoop, I'm sorry, did I miss somebody? I'm sorry, you okay? You can do it right now, sir. Go ahead. Sorry, my apologies.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I see some Grand River comments, but I don't see the Long Point Region Conservation Authority comments in here.
Through the mayor, they are an appendix. They have comments on our track changes versions, so that is Appendix C. So you'll see their comments kind of along the edges. They didn't submit them in just a letter form. They just commented on the actual proposed bylaw, so you can see what their comments were. So it'll say comment L1,
Okay.
L2, L3. Yeah.
Like, okay, if I go to page 135, what we used to have was current is about the middle of the page, and then what you guys are after is later down the proposed section. And it doesn't have anything to do with the Conservation Authority, does it? It's basically been taken out.
Through the mayor, I don't have the same page numbering, so I'm not sure which section.
5 of 7?
Okay, so in the actual report.
Yeah, in your report, it gives you the current policy,
Yep.
and then your proposed policy is further down, and it runs on to the next page as well. But it doesn't have in there, in consultation with the Conservation Authority. It's been removed.
Through the mayor, it does have it, the current policy allowing for the waiving of the requirement of an EIS reads as follows. And then it does, on the third line, say, in consultation with the appropriate Conservation Authority. And that remains in the proposed new wording.
Okay, and then just below that, I see it here, it says, the decision to waive an EIS is at the sole discretion of the Director of Planning. I've been on the Policy Review Committee for the Conservation Authority for a couple of years now, and I've never seen that anywhere. So that does that mean council can't even waive it? That if our Director of Planning isn't there for a month, nobody can do anything?
Through the mayor, I think it's delegated to staff, so you could always waive it as well.
So do we need to put that in there specifically? I didn't see it anywhere else in any other ones that I've had to look at, and I've looked at a pile of them.
Through the mayor, the purpose, oh, do you want to?
Sure, maybe I could just add a comment, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Height, council can always make that decision. What we're trying to do is to speed things up so that staff can waive that. The Director of Planning is Ms. Dusling and or designate, so that we're always there to speed things up. It's to avoid an applicant having to come to council to seek that waiving. We can actually do that.
Yeah, I can agree with that thought process, but it should say or designate. It shouldn't say specifically that one person, right? And so then my next question is up further on these on the setbacks, basically. Do you have, are these the exact setbacks that we currently use? Page 2 of your report, 132 of council's.
Through the mayor, yes, these are the setbacks that are in our official plan currently.
In the new official plan or in the other official plan?
The existing official plan, so I think it's the same as the new one. No natural heritage study has been completed, so they remain the same.
Okay, because one of the things I noted in your Grand River Conservation Authority comments, your unevaluated wetland, it's up to 120 meters. Theirs actually isn't that. You're missing a size limit, because An unevaluated wetland could be a pond, and you're pushing the setbacks to 120 meters. What they have is a limit in there, and it has to be over 2 hectares. And that's a very key piece of information, because then it's a real wetland.
Through the mayor, I didn't change any of that section just because it's a whole other project, so we couldn't really touch it through this.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Height, I think what you're asking are details of a natural heritage strategy, which is forthcoming in Norfolk County Planning.
So right now, our Norfolk County unevaluated wetlands, which could be irrigation ponds if they're mapped incorrectly, has this property we just severed with that pond could be a wetland, and he couldn't even build that barn. That's one of my concerns.
Through the mayor, that's not in our mapping today.
You don't have any of this mapped.
We do, just not the unevaluated wetlands. We have provincially significant wetlands mapped from the information from the MNR.
And do you have the set, like on the mapping, the natural overlay that shows the 120 meters and all the high water marks and all of those setbacks? You have that mapped in Norfolk County GIS?
Through the mayor, yes, we have the setbacks from the features for wetlands. And we have hazard lands mapped as well, but I'm not sure. Could you just repeat the question?
Okay, when you look in Norfolk County GIS, you can see all the lines, the hazard lot lines, and the shorelines and whatnot. Do you have the mapping that takes you into the setback?
Through the mayor, for wetlands, we do. We don't for everything, but wetlands, we definitely do.
And it shows that?
Yes.
I'll have to see how that works. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alicia, my question is on page 135 of our agenda, page 5 of your report, and it's in the middle where it talks about the fact, I guess, the motivation for this amendment. And I'll just quickly read from the paragraph. It's not possible for staff to use the policy as it's currently worded, in essence, because the CAs don't provide input on any natural heritage feature beyond wetlands. I guess I was surprised to read that. So who does? Is it just MNRF that would provide feedback on heritage features other than wetlands?
Through the mayor, it depends on the feature. So for example, significant woodlands were determined by the county, I believe. So in that case, it was all in-house.
It's our own decision in-house. I understand that.
Yeah. Significant valley lands, I believe, are MNR. Provincially significant wetlands are MNR, but we do deal with the Conservation Authority.
Okay, and I suppose habitat of endangered species would be MNRF as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So do you think this amendment, and I think all of us support the idea of making the process simpler and more streamlined, is this something that will allow us on a number of occasions over the typical year to waive the requirement, or is this something that would be very infrequent in any event, and so it won't make much of a change procedurally?
Through the mayor, it will be quite a significant change.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Is there anyone in attendance who wishes to speak in favor of the official plan amendment? And if so, you may come forward and speak in favor. If there's anyone in attendance that wishes to speak in opposition or in general to this amendment, please come forward. Is there anything further from council? Shall I close the public meeting? Mover, seconder? Wells, thank you. Geisen, seconded, thank you. Those in favor of closing this? That is carried, thank you. What is your wish, gentlemen? Councillor Black?
With the staff recommendation?
Thank you, sir. Do I have a seconder for this? Councillor Columbus. Councillor Black has moved. Councillor Columbus is second. That the proposed general amendment of the Norfolk County official plan to implement policies relating to the natural heritage features and complete applications file number is in front of you, that this be approved for reasons set out in report number DCS 18-05, and further that no public input was received and was therefore not considered as part of this decision. Is there discussion on the motion on the floor? I hear none. I will call the question. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. I'm turning to page 155. This is staff report DCS 18-18. So general zoning bylaw amendments to our Norfolk County zoning bylaw 1Z 2014. Shannon, how are you? Good. You're here, so therefore I'll ask you to present your report to us, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of council, staff, and public. This application or this amendment is being brought back to you today. It was previously heard at the December 12th council and committee meeting regarding proposed general amendments to the zoning bylaw in terms of the form and function and usability. In front of you is a list, and the report that was brought forward is substantially the same in terms of the proposals that are included regarding some definitions with respect to some addition of uses and some parking provisions as well. The main points received from the December 12th meeting and revised as to bring back before you today include an amendment to the zoning provisions for crematoriums, the parking location, parking on residential lots, as well as the removal of change houses, zone provisions in the definition, as well as the removal of the proposed provisions respecting recreational vehicles. The provisions with respect to the change houses and recreational vehicles have been removed at this time to allow the opportunity to do some additional consultation with respect in particular to the recreational vehicle proposals, which we heard quite a bit of feedback on. So we'll do some additional public consultation in terms of that and also speak a little bit more with the Building and Bylaw Enforcement Division in terms of creating a functional and usable bylaw that will be workable for all parties. So that will come back through a later version of our zoning cleanup. Additionally, the change houses were removed based on the Hastings Drive Ontario Municipal hearing, which was heard earlier this month. So through one of our next versions of our zoning cleanups, you'll see that back on the table. In terms of the zoning provisions for crematoriums, this was amended to create the need for, previously we had 8 hectares for the lot size. This has been revised to 2 hectares based on the discussions that we had, as well as a minimum setback of 200 meters to a sensitive land use, including a school, residential zones, community centers. This again is a change from what was previously submitted or proposed, which was at 70 meters. The last item is the parking location. So where we previously had it identified for single detached, semi-detached dwellings, which would have included all of the county, including some of your rural and hamlet areas. The amendment now looks to apply that to urban residential R1 through R4 zones, and so that'll focus it down into the urban centers as well. So those are the changes that have been proposed, and we are seeking again council's approval in terms of these housekeeping amendments, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on specific items. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the question with respect to the crematorium, you mentioned 2 hectares, but a residential zone within 200 meters of a residential zone, is that what's proposed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah. So it would be, they'd have to locate on a minimum lot size of 2 hectares. As well as that, there would have to be a minimum of 200 meters setback from that property line to any other residential zone within a radius.
So what if it's a single lot out in the country that's 198 meters away? Is that considered a residential zone?
It would insofar, well, in terms of an agriculture property, a crematorium is not permitted in the agricultural zone, so they would have to come for a specific zoning bylaw amendment for that. So we would want to look at that and take that into consideration as part of the overall review for placement of a crematorium in the rural area.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chairman, I'm looking on page 161 regarding the parking provisions. And this one actually, this part of it isn't really a change, but paragraph B under the proposed policy where it says not more than one required parking space may be located within the front yard or required exterior side yard. Is that on the driveway? In other words, although it talks about being in the front yard, but it means on the driveway, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. And I did put a bit of a diagram together in terms to illustrate some of the parking locations. So with that, on the diagram, you can see the location of the house and the required front yard. So when you have a single detached or semi-detached or duplex or townhouse, it requires 2 parking spaces associated with the use. So with that, one of those parking spaces can be located within the required front yard. So on the top slide, or the top house you'd see there, it shows 4 cars being able to be parked in the driveway, and the 2 cars the cars in red are the required spaces. So that shows that one is within the setback required in terms of the front yard setback, and then the other one is located within that required 6 meters. And then on the one with the garage, you have 1 car, which is, if you have a single car garage, that is considered one of your required spaces, and then the other one can be parked in the driveway. If you have a 2-car garage, regardless as if you park in it or not, it is considered your 2 spaces. So, but the parking would be kind of focused into the driveway locations.
Further questions? No more questions at this time, so I'll open it to the public. I would ask if there's anyone in attendance this evening who would like to speak in favor of this official plan amendment. If so, come to the microphone, please. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak in opposition or in general to this amendment? Please come forward. Yes, sir.
Just trying to figure this out. It's not very clear in how you got this all done. Like, you have the red cars as it's okay to park there. Now, I have a situation where I have a garage and I have parking for 4 vehicles, but we have 5. And that's because of work related and stuff like that. So are we allowed, and we're saying we're not allowed to park on our lawn. In the last couple of years in Waterford, we've had vandalism. Our cars have been scratched deeply in that, and I've had 4 vehicles that had over $2,000 damage, had the police involved. There's nothing they can do about that because they can't catch these people that are doing it. And because I have an extra vehicle and I have a truck that I just bought and I do not want it wrecked, so I park it on the lawn, but it's movable, so it's not there all the time. So you're saying now we can't park on our lawn anymore? Is that what's going on? And why?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the provisions, what we are looking at doing is trying to create opportunities where cars are parked on a driveway or an identified area.